Legends are not simply born. They emerge from the deepest recesses of time, rising like mist from the valleys of forgotten dreams. They are not bound by the pages of books or the tongues of storytellers. Instead, they weave themselves into the air we breathe, the ground we tread, and the silence that lingers in the spaces between. They are not created, they are discovered, hidden beneath layers of history, waiting for the moment when the world is ready to remember them. In the echoes of forgotten tales, where the faint hum of eternity meets the fading light of memory, these legends dwell. They do not fade into obscurity. They linger in shadows, alive but unseen, as though the universe itself conspires to preserve their essence. And there they wait, not in urgency, but in a patient, knowing stillness, as if time itself bends to their will. It begins subtly, as all great awakenings do. A faint whisper carried by the wind, so soft you might mistake it for your imagination. A flicker of movement in the corner of your eye, gone the moment you turn your head. A feeling, a quiet, inexplicable pull, as if the ground beneath your feet has shifted, urging you forward, guiding you to a place you've never been but somehow already know. You try to ignore it. After all, the rational mind clings to what it can understand. But the signs persist, growing bolder with each passing day. A book falls open to a page that seems to speak directly to you. A stranger's words echo thoughts you've never shared aloud. Dreams become more vivid, painting images of places and people that feel achingly familiar, yet impossibly distant. And then, one day it happens. The world around you seems to pause, as if holding its breath, and you feel it, a presence vast and ancient, brushing against the edges of your awareness. It's not a voice, not exactly. It's more like a resonance, a vibration that hums within your very being. It calls to you, not in words but in feelings, a sense of longing, a spark of curiosity, a tremor of recognition. Legends do not choose lightly. They do not seek the ordinary or the unwilling. They call to those who are meant for more, who carry within them a spark of something extraordinary, even if they have yet to realize it. And when they call, it is not with fanfare or spectacle. It is in the quiet moments, when the world is still and the noise of everyday life fades away, that you hear it most clearly. At first, you might resist. Who wouldn't? The familiar is safe, comforting, predictable. But legends do not offer comfort. They demand courage. They demand transformation. They beckon you to leave behind the life you've built, the identity you've crafted, and step into a story far greater than yourself. And yet, the call is irresistible. It stirs something deep within you, awakening parts of your soul you didn't know existed. Suddenly, the world feels different. The mundane takes on new meaning. A simple walk down a familiar street feels charged with possibility, as though every shadow hides a secret and every turn holds a clue. But here's the truth about legends. They do not simply ask you to follow. They challenge you. They test your resolve, your strength, your very sense of self. They strip away the layers of doubt and fear that have kept you tethered to the ordinary, revealing the raw, unyielding core of who you truly are. You'll find yourself standing at a crossroads, the weight of 1,000 choices pressing down on your shoulders. One path leads back to the life you've known, a life of comfort and certainty. The other? Well, the other leads into the unknown, a place where the air is thick with mystery, where every step is a leap of faith, and where the only guide you have is the whisper of a tale that refuses to let you go. And as you stand there, hesitating, the realization dawns. This isn't just a call. It's a reckoning. A moment that will define not just the path you take, but the person you become. Legends are not just stories. They are mirrors, reflecting the deepest truths of who we are and who we are meant to be. They do not seek to entertain. They seek to awaken. To remind us that life is not measured by the steps we take, but by the leaps we dare to make. And so, the question remains, when the legend calls, will you answer? Will you follow the pull of something greater, something that defies explanation and transcends reason? Will you step into the unknown, not as the person you are, but as the person you were always meant to become? Because legends are not content to wait forever. They call to those who are ready, even if they don't yet know it. They call to those who are willing, even if they are afraid. They call to those who understand deep in their bones that some stories are not just meant to be heard. They are meant to be lived. And when they call, they don't just offer a choice. They offer a destiny. One that begins not in the world as it is, but in the world as it could be. A world shaped by courage, by hope, by the unshakable belief that the impossible is within reach. So when the whispers grow louder, when the signs become undeniable, and when the pull becomes too strong to resist, you'll know, this isn't just a story calling you back. It's your story, waiting to be written, waiting to be lived, waiting to become the legend it was always meant to be. Under a star-studded sky, where each glimmer seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 untold stories, the quiet town of Havenwood lay cloaked in a serene stillness. The town, nestled in a valley carved by time itself, seemed suspended in a perpetual moment of tranquility. Beyond its cobblestone streets and weathered cottages, the world grew wilder, with the forest rising like an ancient guardian. The trees, towering and wise, swayed gently in the night breeze, their leaves whispering secrets only they could understand. In the far reaches of this quiet haven, on the outskirts where the town faded into the embrace of the wilderness, stood a lone cabin. It was a modest structure, its walls weathered by countless seasons of rain, snow, and sun, yet it exuded a quiet dignity. Ivy curled around its wooden beams as though nature had taken it into her fold, and a faint plume of smoke spiraled from the stone chimney, blending seamlessly into the velvety night sky. Inside the cabin, the warmth of the fire filled every corner, the flickering light painting the walls with shifting shadows that danced like ghosts of memories past. This was not an ordinary cabin. It was a treasure chest of stories, each object within its walls a relic from a life steeped in adventure. Maps, their edges tattered and their surfaces marked with hand-drawn annotations, adorned the walls. They spoke of distant lands and uncharted territories, places few had dared to venture. Shelves groaned under the weight of artifacts, rusted coins, ancient pottery, and carved trinkets from civilizations long since fallen to dust. In the heart of this space sat Ethan Wilder. The retired treasure hunter leaned back in his well-worn armchair, a mug of steaming tea cradled in his hands. The chair creaked faintly under his weight, its leather softened by years of use, its brass tacks gleaming faintly in the firelight. Ethan's silhouette was rugged and sturdy, his frame still bearing the strength of a man who had faced countless perils. His hands, rough and calloused, told stories of their own. Stories of gripping ropes to scale impossible cliffs, of brushing centuries-old dust from priceless artifacts, of holding fast in moments when his life had hung by a thread. The tea, a blend of chamomile and honey, filled the air with its calming aroma. Ethan raised the mug to his lips, savoring the warmth that spread through him with each sip. It was a simple act, one he might have overlooked in his youth, but now it carried a significance he could scarcely put into words. For a man who had spent a lifetime chasing treasures and surviving dangers most couldn't fathom, these quiet moments of reflection felt like the most precious gift of all. The fire crackled softly, sending occasional sparks upward, where they faded into the air like tiny, fleeting stars. Ethan's gaze followed them, his mind drifting to the countless fires he had sat by in distant lands. He could almost hear the voices of old companions, some long gone, others scattered to the winds, sharing tales of daring escapes and lost fortunes. He remembered the way the desert air cooled as the sun dipped below the horizon, the sound of waves crashing against the hull of a ship as it cut through uncharted waters, the oppressive silence of an ancient tomb just before a discovery that would change everything. Around him, the cabin seemed alive with the echoes of his past. A leather-bound journal rested on the side table, its pages thick with sketches, notes, and fragments of thought captured in hurried strokes of ink. Next to it lay a tarnished compass, its needle still true despite years of use. On the mantel above the hearth stood a collection of treasures, each one insignificant to the untrained eye but invaluable to Ethan. There was a fragment of a statue from a forgotten temple, a chipped coin from an empire lost to time, a vial of sand from a desert where the wind sang stories in its relentless howl. Ethan's eyes lingered on these objects, and for a moment, he allowed himself to be carried away by the memories they evoked. The coin reminded him of a harrowing escape from a jungle teeming with danger, the vial of sand of a sunrise that had painted the sky in hues he had never seen before and doubted he would ever see again. Each item was a thread in the tapestry of his life, a testament to the risks he had taken and the wonders he had witnessed. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, their rustling harmonizing with the soft crackle of the fire. Through the cabin's window, the night stretched endlessly, the stars burning with a clarity that could only be seen far from the lights of cities. The constellations hung in their eternal patterns, their brilliance undimmed by the passage of time. Ethan's gaze turned to them, and for a moment, he felt the same pull he had felt in his youth. The call of the unknown, the irresistible urge to go, to seek, to find. But tonight, he stayed rooted in his chair. The call was there, yes, but it was distant now, like a whisper carried on the wind. Ethan leaned back, letting the warmth of the fire seep into his bones, and closed his eyes briefly. In the stillness, he could hear his own breathing, steady and calm, a rhythm that grounded him in the present. The room around him, with its quiet chaos of relics and memories, seemed to hold its breath, as if it too were reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. The old armchair creaked again as Ethan shifted, setting his mug down on the table beside him. He glanced once more at the journal, its leather cover worn smooth by years of handling, and smiled faintly. Not tonight, he thought. Tonight is for peace. And so, under the watchful eyes of the stars and surrounded by the whispers of his storied past, Ethan Wilder let the quiet of the night wrap around him like a blanket. The fire crackled, the wind sighed through the trees, and in that cabin on the edge of the world, a man who had lived 1,000 lifetimes allowed himself, for now, to simply be. Ethan thought his days of danger were behind him. Tucked away in the worn pages of his journal, sealed in the weathered maps hanging on his walls, and left behind in the countless treasures he had once unearthed. These were relics of a life he no longer lived, memories he had come to cherish in the quiet solitude of his cabin. Yet tonight, as the fire cast its flickering glow across the room, those days felt closer than they had in years. The knock came suddenly, shattering the fragile peace like a stone breaking the surface of still water. It wasn't loud, but in the profound silence of the night, it might as well have been thunder. At first, Ethan didn't move. He sat perfectly still, his mind struggling to reconcile the sound with the isolation of his location. Who could possibly be knocking at his door at this hour? This wasn't the kind of place that welcomed casual visitors, and the nearest neighbor was miles away. The knock came again, firmer this time, more insistent. Ethan felt a strange prickle run down his spine. It wasn't fear, not yet, but the kind of unease that comes when something disrupts the natural order of things. Slowly, he set his mug of tea down on the small table beside him, the porcelain clinking softly against the wood. His hands, rough and calloused from years of gripping ropes and deciphering ancient inscriptions, hovered briefly in the air, as if uncertain what to do next. Another knock, sharper now, echoed through the cabin. Ethan rose from his chair, his movements deliberate and unhurried, though his heart had begun to beat faster. The fire crackled behind him, its warmth suddenly feeling more like a spotlight than a comfort. Shadows danced on the walls, stretching and twisting with an almost sinister energy. His eyes darted to the windows, but they revealed nothing beyond the impenetrable darkness of the forest. The trees outside swayed gently in the night breeze, their branches brushing against the cabin like skeletal fingers. The sound of the wind, once a soothing companion, now felt ominous, as if it carried whispers from something unseen. Ethan's hand instinctively went to the walking stick leaning against the wall near the door. It wasn't much, but its solid oak frame and well-worn grip offered some semblance of reassurance. With his other hand, he reached for the latch, pausing just inches away. Whoever was outside hadn't called out, hadn't announced themselves. That, more than anything, sent a ripple of unease through him. It wasn't the behavior of a lost traveler or a neighbor in need. It was deliberate, silent, and unnerving. The knock came again, louder this time, reverberating through the cabin. Ethan froze, his breath caught in his chest. For a moment, he considered ignoring it. Maybe they would go away. Maybe this was just a mistake, some lost soul who had wandered too far into the woods. But deep down, Ethan knew better. He had spent a lifetime honing his instincts, and those instincts were screaming now, louder than the knocks on the door. Whoever, or whatever, was outside hadn't arrived by accident. He stepped closer to the door, his boots making faint thuds against the wooden floor. The air in the cabin felt heavier now, charged with an almost electric tension. He leaned in, straining to hear beyond the thick wooden barrier. For a moment, there was nothing, just the crackle of the fire and the distant rustle of leaves. Then, faintly, he heard it. Breathing. Low, steady, deliberate. Ethan's grip tightened on the walking stick. His mind raced, replaying countless scenarios from his past. Narrow escapes, ambushes, betrayals. Each memory came with its own lesson, its own warning. But none of them prepared him for this. The breathing outside continued, slow and unhurried, as if the visitor knew they had all the time in the world. It wasn't the labored gasp of someone lost and exhausted. It wasn't the hurried panting of someone frightened or in distress. It was calm, almost unnervingly so. "Who's there?" Ethan called out, his voice steady but firm. No response. The silence stretched, thick and oppressive. Ethan felt his pulse pounding in his ears, his senses sharpening as adrenaline began to course through his veins. He wasn't a man prone to panic, but this was different. He glanced back toward the fireplace, its glow casting the room in an almost otherworldly light. The artifacts on his shelves seemed to glint in the firelight, as if they too were waiting for what would come next. His eyes fell on the old compass on the mantel, its needle quivering faintly as if sensing the tension in the room. Another knock. This one was slower, heavier, like the deliberate tolling of a bell. Ethan's jaw tightened. Whoever was out there wasn't going to leave. Taking a deep breath, he gripped the walking stick tightly and reached for the latch with his free hand. The metal felt cool under his fingertips, a stark contrast to the warmth of the room. His mind raced through possibilities, bandits, bounty hunters, ghosts from his past. Whatever waited on the other side, he knew he couldn't ignore it. He turned the latch slowly, the sound seeming louder than it should in the stillness. The door creaked as it swung open, revealing the darkness beyond. The firelight spilled out onto the porch, illuminating nothing but the empty forest. Ethan's eyes scanned the shadows, his grip on the stick tightening. He could still feel it, that presence, that unshakable certainty that he wasn't alone. The air outside was colder, sharper, carrying with it a faint scent he couldn't quite place. "Who's there?" he asked again, his voice cutting through the night. For a moment, there was nothing. Just the wind, the trees, and the suffocating quiet. And then, from the shadows, a voice spoke, a voice that sent a chill down Ethan's spine. Opening the door, Ethan was startled to find a young girl, no older than 12, standing on his porch, clutching a weathered journal against her chest. Her eyes were wide, her face pale and drawn, like a fragile porcelain mask against the shadows of the night. The soft glow of the lanterns in the distance barely illuminated her figure, but in that brief moment, Ethan could see the weight of fear etched into every line of her delicate features. Her small hands trembled slightly, gripping the worn leather of the journal as though it were the only thing tethering her to reality. The journal itself was old, its cover cracked and weathered with time, yet something about its presence exuded an air of importance, as if it contained secrets far greater than the girl could comprehend. There was a symbol carved faintly into the surface, just above the clasp, an ancient sigil Ethan had seen once before during his travels, but the memory was distant, shrouded in the haze of countless years and countless relics. Ethan's first instinct was to close the door. The night outside was thick with uncertainty, and this girl appeared as though she had wandered out of a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. Yet something stopped him, something deeper than mere curiosity. His gaze softened, and he stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. The girl hesitated, glancing behind her at the endless expanse of trees looming in the distance, their twisted branches reaching like skeletal fingers toward the cabin. She seemed torn between running and finding refuge, caught in a desperate, unyielding battle with the unknown forces that pursued her. Slowly, her small feet crossed the threshold, and Ethan quietly shut the door behind her. Inside, the warmth of the fire lit up the shadows that had followed her. The crackling flames illuminated the small cabin, a sanctuary from the vast wilderness outside. Yet the tension in the room thickened. Ethan could feel it, an almost oppressive silence, as though the very air held its breath. "Are you hurt?" Ethan asked gently, his voice soft enough not to startle her, but firm enough to convey his concern. He motioned toward the hearth, where a wooden chair sat beside the fire. "Sit. You're safe here." The girl sank into the chair, her slender form curling into itself as if trying to disappear entirely. Her hands remained wrapped tightly around the journal, cradling it protectively against her chest. She didn't speak for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the crackling flames in front of her. The heat of the fire flickered in her wide, fearful eyes, making them appear even larger, more vulnerable. It's all I have," she finally whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. Her breath was shallow, her words barely more than a breath of air, but they carried weight, a heavy, unbearable burden. "They're coming for it." Ethan frowned deeply. His mind raced through the possibilities, the artifacts, ancient tomes, and relics that had passed through his hands in the past. He'd faced mercenaries, rival treasure hunters, and those with darker intentions, but none had felt quite like this. There was something different about this girl and the urgency she carried with her. "What's in it?" he asked, his tone calm but insistent. Her lips quivered, and for a moment, Ethan thought she wouldn't answer. Her eyes flickered to the edges of the room, scanning the shadows as though expecting them to move or reveal more of the truth. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "My father told me to protect it, to run." He said they would come. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The weight of her words settled deep in his chest. "Your father?" She nodded slowly. "He was a scholar. He said he had been studying it for years. But then, something happened. He told me to leave, to find you, that you would know what to do." Ethan's mind was spinning. Scholars, ancient texts, mysterious artifacts. It wasn't unfamiliar territory, but the sheer recklessness of a child carrying such a burden unsettled him more than he cared to admit. "Why me?" he asked, though he already had his suspicions. "I don't know exactly," she replied, her voice barely a breath. "He said you've been through this before, that you've seen what happens when they come." Her words were like whispers in the dark, each syllable carrying the weight of unspeakable dread. Ethan sat quietly, watching her closely. Her gaze darted around the room again, restless, as though the walls themselves might come alive and consume her. He knew the look all too well, the unmistakable expression of someone hunted by shadows they couldn't escape. "They'll follow," she said after a pause, her voice more forceful now. "They'll come if they know I have it. I saw them. In the woods. They don't care who they hurt. They won't stop until it's theirs." Ethan reached forward, placing a steadying hand on hers for a fleeting moment, offering a small semblance of comfort. "We'll figure this out," he assured her. "But we need to understand what we're dealing with." The girl nodded slightly, though her eyes betrayed a deep fear, an unwavering certainty that this was far from over. Ethan's mind raced, searching for answers, piecing together fragments from old journals and past encounters. No artifact was truly safe, and no secret remained hidden forever. But something about this, something about the way the girl held onto that journal like it was her lifeline, told him that this was bigger than anything he had faced before. They sat there in silence for what felt like an eternity. The fire crackled softly, casting long, flickering shadows across the room. And in the quiet, Ethan knew that his days of danger weren't as far behind him as he once thought. "Mr. Wilder," she whispered, her voice trembling, almost swallowed by the quiet that filled the small, dimly lit cabin. "They're coming for it, the artifact. I need your help." Ethan sat in his worn armchair, his eyes fixed on the girl with a steady, searching gaze. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, the only source of warmth and light in the room, yet the tension in the air seemed to dim even its glow. His fingers tapped gently on the armrest as his mind processed her words, trying to grasp the full weight of her plea. His heart, once hardened by years of solitude, began to stir, a reaction long buried beneath layers of quiet contentment. "Who's coming?" he asked, his voice low and deliberate, cutting through the stillness. "And how do you know about the artifact?" The girl's hands clenched around the weathered journal even tighter, her knuckles turning white beneath the weight of its significance. "They've been following me for weeks," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Men in dark cloaks, moving through the trees like whispers, silent but relentless. "They know about the journal, Mr. Wilder. They know what it holds." Ethan's brows furrowed deeply. The image she described wasn't unfamiliar to him. Shadowy figures lurking in the edges of the unknown, their motives steeped in secrets best left undiscovered. Yet this felt different. There was a sense of desperation in her voice, a raw fear that gripped her as though the very fabric of her existence was unraveling. "Explain," he urged, his tone calm but firm. "Who are they? And why would they want an old journal?" "They're scholars," she said, her words sharp and deliberate, but not the kind my father used to speak about. "These people, they study the dark, the forbidden. They seek knowledge at any cost, bending reality to their will. My father spent years studying the artifact, trying to understand it, to protect its power. But once he realized what it could do, everything changed." Ethan leaned forward slightly, his curiosity piqued. His days of adventure had long since passed, yet the allure of ancient mysteries always held a thread of fascination. "What power are you talking about?" he asked, his voice low, careful not to startle her further. Her eyes filled with a haunted look, and her breath hitched. "The artifact. It's not just a collection of pages and symbols. It holds magic, ancient, forgotten magic. My father said it could reshape reality, rewrite history. He believed that if the wrong people got their hands on it, they would use it to control, to destroy." Ethan leaned back, absorbing her words. He had come across his fair share of powerful artifacts, relics that defied logic and reality, but nothing quite like this. The weight of her description was unlike any tale he'd encountered before. "And what did he do?" "He hid it," she said, her voice resolute despite her fear. "He kept it locked away, knowing that if it ever fell into the wrong hands, the consequences would be unimaginable. But then, he realized it wasn't enough. He couldn't protect it alone. Her voice wavered as her hands shook, the journal trembling in her grasp. That's when he told me I had to find you. Ethan's mind raced through memories of his own past, of shadowy figures, clandestine meetings, and the pursuit of ancient secrets. The stories blurred together, but the danger was always unmistakable. And now, it seemed, the danger had found him once again. "You've been running," he said softly, the words emerging more as a statement than a question. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know how long I can keep running. They won't stop. Not until they have what they came for." Ethan leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. He knew better than anyone how perilous the pursuit of forbidden knowledge could be. Yet this was different. The artifact she spoke of wasn't just some forgotten relic. It was a weapon, a force capable of reshaping reality, of altering the very foundations of existence. "And now," she said, her eyes meeting his with desperation, "now they're close. They found me." Ethan exhaled slowly, a long, deliberate breath that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 thoughts. The firelight flickered across his face, casting shadows that danced around the room like specters of past adventures. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, his voice calm but layered with understanding. "I need you to protect it," she said firmly, her voice stronger this time. "Help me keep it safe. Help me keep it hidden." Ethan studied her for a long moment, watching the firelight flicker across her pale face, her vulnerability stark against the strength of her resolve. She wasn't a warrior, not by trade. She was just a child caught in a storm far beyond her understanding, and yet she bore the weight of an ancient power. "You don't have to face this alone," he said finally, his tone steady and resolute. "But we need to understand exactly what we're up against. First, we uncover the truth. Then we hide it, as your father wanted." Her shoulders sagged slightly in relief, but her gaze remained fixed on the journal, her grip tightening once again. The quiet stillness between them deepened as the fire crackled softly, illuminating the ancient symbols etched into the pages. "I'll help you," Ethan added. "But be warned. Nothing we do will be without consequence." The girl nodded solemnly, her breath hitching once more as if she knew the path ahead was fraught with danger, yet couldn't bear to face it alone. "The black shadows," she said, her voice trembling, each word a fragile breath escaping her lips. "And because this," she held up the journal tightly, her fingers gripping it with an almost desperate strength, "was my father's." Ethan sat in silence, his eyes locked onto the journal as though the very weight of its existence pressed down upon him. The name, "The Black Shadows," resonated through the room, an echo of ancient legends and forgotten horrors. He had heard whispers, tales from distant lands of a group shrouded in secrecy, pulling strings behind the scenes, manipulating history, and manipulating the boundaries of reality itself. Yet, they were myths, mere stories of dark figures who sought power at any cost. Now, they were standing at his door. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint crackle of the fire, the only movement the slight tremble in the girl's hands as she gripped the journal tighter. Ethan's mind raced through countless memories, his own adventures, his battles with shadowy enemies, and the times when the pursuit of knowledge had nearly cost him everything. But the Black Shadows weren't mere foes. They were something more insidious, more far-reaching. "Tell me everything," Ethan said quietly, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. His gaze remained fixed on her, the weight of his curiosity and caution blending into one focused expression. "Who are they? What do they want?" She inhaled sharply, her breath hitching as if speaking their name would summon them from the shadows. "They're more than a cult," she began, her voice trembling with the weight of her father's warnings. "They're a secret society, centuries old, connected to powers beyond our comprehension. My father spent years piecing together what little was known about them, what they've done, what they're capable of. He believed they had uncovered ancient texts, rituals, and artifacts that could manipulate reality itself. Ethan leaned forward slightly, the firelight flickering across his face, making the shadows dance like phantoms. "And this journal," he prompted, his voice low and deliberate, "is part of that power?" "Yes," she said, her grip tightening on the journal. "It contains rituals, symbols, and knowledge that were never meant to be revealed to the world. My father believed that if they ever got their hands on it, they would use it to control the very fabric of existence, to bend reality to their will." Ethan's mind was a whirlwind of memories, of ancient crypts, cursed artifacts, and battles fought in the dark. Yet nothing quite matched the scale of what she was describing. A force powerful enough to alter reality, to rewrite history, was unlike anything he had encountered before. The stakes were higher, the risks more dire, and the enemy more elusive than ever. "How did they find you?" he asked, his voice soft but firm. He needed to understand the depth of their reach. "They've been following my family for generations," she said, her voice steadying despite the fear etched into her face. "My father was the last link to the truth. They came for him first, tried to force him to give them the journal, but he refused. They didn't understand until it was too late. He had hidden it, encoded it with protections only he could decipher. But now that he's gone, they found me." Ethan exhaled slowly, his thoughts turning dark as he absorbed her story. His mind recalled old memories, of betrayals, of ancient enemies who sought knowledge for power rather than enlightenment. He knew the lengths people would go to, the horrors they would unleash. "They'll stop at nothing," she continued, her voice unwavering. "They believe if they can access the rituals within this journal, they'll gain control over reality. Bend time, reshape worlds, make history serve their will. My father fought to protect this, to ensure it never fell into the wrong hands. But now it's mine to guard." Ethan sat back in his chair, his hands resting on the arms as he processed her words. The firelight flickered across his face, casting long, ominous shadows that mirrored the weight of the task before him. He had known danger before, but this was something entirely different. "If we don't stop them," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly, "they'll destroy everything. The world will be theirs." Ethan's jaw clenched as he leaned forward again, his voice steady yet laced with an unmistakable seriousness. "Then we don't just protect it," he said, his tone brooding, "we obliterate it." Her breath hitched, a sharp intake as though the very suggestion was unthinkable. "Destroy it," she repeated, her voice faltering. "But what if that's not enough? What if they find a way to bring it back?" "We burn every trace," Ethan said solemnly. "Every page, every symbol, every ritual. We ensure they can never summon the power hidden within. The black shadows thrive on knowledge and secrecy. If we leave a single piece untouched, they'll return." "But what if," she started, her eyes wide with doubt, fear, and uncertainty. "We don't have a choice," Ethan interrupted, his voice firm. "They can't be allowed to harness this kind of power. Not if it means rewriting the very laws of reality." For a moment, the room hung in tense silence. The flickering firelight painted a scene of quiet desperation, the shadows stretching longer and darker, a testament to the gravity of their situation. The girl's hands shook, her grip still tight around the journal as though it were her only anchor to reality. "We'll start with the symbols," Ethan said after a pause, his voice low and decisive. "Piece by piece, we'll dismantle the magic. And if that doesn't work," he let the words trail off, knowing that the task ahead was far from simple. "I understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The fire crackled louder, the only sound filling the stillness. The path ahead was perilous, and they both knew that every moment spent in its shadow increased the risk. Yet neither hesitated, not when the fate of the world rested in their hands. Her name was Clara, the daughter of Ethan's old partner, who had vanished years ago while searching for the relic. The journal she carried was filled with cryptic notes, detailed sketches, and ancient symbols that seemed to pulse with a dark energy of their own. Each page was an intricate map leading into the unknown, and at the center of it all, the artifact itself. A stunning, otherworldly amulet that shimmered with an almost hypnotic glow. The symbols etched into its surface were unlike anything Ethan had encountered, crafted in a language long forgotten, yet somehow familiar. According to legend, the amulet wasn't just a relic of immense power. It was said to grant invincibility to its wearer, a limitless force capable of altering the very fabric of reality. The story spoke of kings and tyrants who sought it, empires that crumbled in its pursuit, and entire civilizations that were wiped from existence because they dared to wield such forbidden magic. The amulet was more than just a tool for power. It was the embodiment of a danger so profound, so overwhelming, that even those who dared seek it were often consumed by the abyss of their own ambition. Clara's hands trembled slightly as she carefully turned the pages, the weight of her family's history pressing heavily against her. Her father had devoted his life to unraveling the mystery of the artifact, piecing together clues from ancient texts and deciphering cryptic symbols hidden in forgotten corners of the world. But now, with the journal in her possession, the true magnitude of their journey became more apparent. It wasn't just about finding a relic, it was a battle against time, against a force that could reshape the very laws of existence. "This amulet," Clara whispered, her voice fragile yet resolute, "it's not just a weapon, it's a catalyst for chaos. Whoever controls it can manipulate reality to their will. They could rewrite history, undo mistakes, and create a world where only they reign supreme." Ethan sat quietly, his sharp eyes scanning the intricate sketches and fading notes. He could see the fear behind her determined facade, the weight of knowing what the artifact represented. His own adventures had taken him deep into ancient ruins and dark dungeons, but never had he encountered something so terrifyingly close to the brink of reality's collapse. "The Black Shadows," Clara continued, her voice barely a whisper, "believe they can harness its power to achieve something beyond mere domination. They don't just want to conquer, they want to control fate itself. My father believed they were close, that they had uncovered a fragment of the amulet's power, something that could push them toward their ultimate goal." Ethan's mind was racing, piecing together ancient stories and long-forgotten myths. The Black Shadows were no mere cult. They were a secret order, shrouded in secrecy and obscured by centuries of manipulation. They operated behind the scenes, pulling strings in the shadows, amassing power in ways that few could comprehend. And now, with Clara's journal, they were drawing closer to the ultimate prize. "We have to destroy it," Ethan said firmly, his voice steady despite the weight of the task ahead. "If we don't, everything they've been working toward for centuries will come to fruition. They won't just bend reality, they'll break it." Clara's fingers clutched the journal tightly, her knuckles turning white as doubt flickered in her eyes. "But how do we destroy something like this? It's beyond just smashing it or burning the pages. Every ritual, every symbol, it's woven into the very fabric of existence. My father dedicated his life to safeguarding it, and yet here we are, holding something so dangerous, with no clear path forward." Ethan leaned forward, his gaze locked onto the complex runes. "We find the core of its power," he said softly. "Every legend, every ancient text, holds clues. There's a way to dismantle it, piece by piece, ritual by ritual. We won't just destroy the artifact itself, we'll erase its influence from history." Clara's breath hitched as if the very idea was almost too much to bear. "But if they get to it first, if they unlock even a fraction of its true power, there's no telling what they'll do." Ethan's voice grew colder, more resolute. "Then we won't let them. We'll take every precaution. We'll unravel every symbol, uncover every secret, until the artifact is stripped of its influence. There can be no room for error." The room seemed to darken around them, the shadows deepening and twisting as though the very air grew heavier with their mission. Every flicker of the fire seemed to reflect the stakes they faced, an imminent battle against forces older than civilization itself. Clara's father had fought to protect this very journal, to ensure that its knowledge never fell into the wrong hands. And now, it had become their burden, their legacy. What if it's already too late? Clara asked, her voice soft, almost a whisper of vulnerability. What if they've already begun using its power? Ethan shook his head slowly. Then we speed up. We don't give them the chance to claim victory. We move faster, more methodically, dismantling every piece of this before they can fully realize what they're doing. This artifact can't be allowed to exist in any form. He paused, his gaze meeting hers with a sense of unwavering determination. And if we fail, then we take them down, even if it costs everything we are. Clara's breath hitched again, but there was no fear in her eyes, only resolve. Then we do it, she said, the weight of her father's sacrifice fueling her determination. No matter what it takes. The fire crackled louder, the room filling with the steady rhythm of their resolve. The shadows stretched long across the walls, but they stood firm against the darkness. Together, they would face the unknown, unraveling the ancient secrets one step at a time, knowing that the fate of the world hung in the balance. Ethan sighed deeply, his mind slipping into a cascade of memories that threatened to overwhelm him. The weight of his past was a heavy burden, and with every breath, it pressed down harder, clouding his thoughts. He had made a promise, one that had seemed so simple at the time, a declaration born from the safety of a quiet moment. A vow to stay out of the treasure hunting game, to leave behind the perilous adventures and forbidden knowledge. But promises, as he had come to learn, were delicate things. Like maps, fragile and easily torn by the winds of fate. They had seemed like steady guides at first, reliable routes plotted with care. But over time, those maps had led him astray. Into darkness. Into the depths of ancient ruins and forgotten tombs where reality bent and twisted, where truth and legend blurred in ways that left even the most resolute shaken. His promise to Clara's father had been born out of a mutual understanding, an unspoken pact to protect the peace, to leave behind the dangerous quests that threatened not only lives but the very fabric of existence itself. And yet, here he was, standing on the precipice once again, teetering on the edge of a world where the past refused to be buried. The memories rolled over him in waves, scattered images of flickering torchlight illuminating carved stone corridors, the echoes of whispered spells reverberating through ancient chambers, and the desperate faces of those who had ventured too far into the abyss. The last expedition, the final one with Clara's father, played out in vivid detail within his mind's eye. They had descended into a lost temple deep within the heart of an uncharted wilderness, driven by the promise of an artifact that was said to possess the power to reshape the world. But as they uncovered more, the truth began to surface. The artifact was no mere relic. It was a force of nature, a manifestation of forbidden magic that defied logic and reason. It was during those final moments, when the lines between reality and myth blurred completely, that Ethan realized the cost of their pursuit. Clara's father had become consumed by the very thing they sought to control. Its dark whispers had seeped into his thoughts, altering his very sense of reality. The artifact, once a tantalizing puzzle, had become something far more insidious, a force that corrupted, twisted, and consumed anyone who dared to wield it. And despite the years that had passed, the weight of that truth had not lessened, it had only grown more oppressive. Now, as Ethan sat by the crackling fire in his cozy cabin, the room seemed to shrink around him. The warmth of the hearth could do little to dispel the cold realization that promises, once made, were not easily broken or forgotten. His hands trembled slightly as he clutched the steaming mug of tea, not from the cold, but from the haunting recollection of a simpler time. A time when the allure of ancient treasure was nothing more than a thrilling game, rather than a race against an ancient darkness. The fire's flickering light cast long, dancing shadows against the walls, and each movement seemed to echo the weight of his decision. Ethan's mind returned to the present, to Clara's trembling voice and the journal she held, a testament to her father's final work, a repository of secrets that could unravel the very fabric of reality. Every page bore the mark of relentless effort, cryptic symbols and forgotten languages meticulously recorded as if to safeguard a power too dangerous for the world to bear. And yet, despite the risk, despite the horror that hung over the artifact like a dark cloud, Ethan knew he couldn't turn away. Promises were not simply words, they were oaths, binding ties that held him to the very legacy of his friend. Clara's father had entrusted him with more than just the responsibility of safeguarding knowledge. He had entrusted him with the duty of stopping the artifact from falling into the wrong hands. Ethan closed his eyes again, letting out a slow, deliberate breath. He could still see the young girl's face, the ghost of hope mixed with a tremor of fear as she whispered the dire truth. "They're coming for it, the artifact." The weight of those words pressed down heavier than any burden he had ever carried. The black shadows, whispers in the dark, ancient shadows of a secret order seeking to control not just power, but reality itself. The room grew still, save for the crackling of the fire and the distant creak of the cabin's old floorboards. Ethan thought of the countless dangers he had faced in the past, the beasts that lurked in the depths of the earth, the curses that snaked through forgotten tombs, the magic that twisted the minds of men. Yet, none of those seemed to compare to the threat that now loomed ahead. The artifact, in all its dark splendor, was the embodiment of humanity's worst fears, the corruption of knowledge, the thirst for power so great that it consumed everything in its path. He opened his eyes slowly, staring into the flickering flame. There was no turning back now. Promises, like maps, sometimes led you exactly where you least wanted to go. But Ethan Wilder had faced too many crossroads, too many impossible choices, to turn away from this one. Whatever lay ahead, whatever darkness they were destined to confront, he would face it, just as he always had. "I'm too old for this," Ethan muttered under his breath, his voice hollow with the weight of years gone by. The fire crackled quietly in the corner, casting flickering shadows across the small cabin, but no warmth could reach the cold place in his heart where memories of danger and betrayal still resided. His hands, rough and weathered from countless adventures, trembled slightly as he gripped the ceramic mug of tea in his lap. The years had eroded his strength, not just physically, but emotionally, leaving him exhausted from the constant struggle against the unknown. But Clara's pleading gaze softened him. Her eyes, wide with desperation, mirrored her father's in a way that sent a pang of guilt through him. She was so young, barely more than a child, and yet here she stood, bearing the weight of her family's fate. Ethan could see the fear in her, the burden she carried like an impossible riddle that had no answer. "Please," she whispered again, her voice barely audible, yet laced with urgency that demanded his attention. "If they get the amulet, they'll hurt so many people. My dad believed you were the only one who could stop them." Her words hung in the air like a heavy fog, suffocating him with their meaning. Ethan's breath hitched, his mind racing back to the past, a life of danger and discovery. A time when the allure of forbidden knowledge was impossible to resist. He had once been fearless, driven by the thrill of uncovering ancient mysteries, of standing on the edge of the unknown. But that version of himself had long since faded into the annals of memory, replaced by a quieter existence, one where danger was a thing of the past, a chapter closed forever. Still, the weight of Clara's request couldn't be ignored. His promise to her father echoed in his mind, a solemn vow to protect the world from the power of the artifact. But the years had blurred those boundaries. The world was not so simple anymore. The darkness they had fought against had grown deeper, more insidious, and far more dangerous. "I've left that life behind," Ethan said softly, his voice carrying the finality of a man who had reached the edge of his limits. "Your father knew that. He trusted me to stay away from this, to let the past stay buried. He believed I could step back, that someone else could carry the burden." Clara's gaze bore into his, her expression resolute. "But no one else can. You know what happens when the amulet falls into the wrong hands. You saw it firsthand. My father was the last line between us and chaos, and now, without him, you're all we have left." Ethan's fingers clenched the mug tightly, the warmth of the tea a poor shield against the storm of emotions that surged within him. He closed his eyes, trying to push back the memories, the echoes of betrayal, the faces of those who had fallen in pursuit of power they couldn't control. Every dark spell, every forgotten ritual they had uncovered played in his mind like a haunting symphony, each note a reminder of how easily even the strongest could be consumed by their own desire for dominance. "You're right," he finally admitted, his voice barely more than a whisper. "No one else knows the truth. No one else understands the danger like I do." His mind drifted to those nights spent in ruins and crypts, the scent of dust and decay clinging to his memories. They had uncovered too much, delved too deep, and the price had been steep. Yet, there was no choice now. "Your father believed in you," Clara said softly, her words grounding him. "Even when everything seemed lost, he believed you were capable of stopping this. He saw something in you, something more than just a relic hunter. He saw the man who could protect the world from the darkness they seek." Ethan exhaled a long, ragged breath, the weight of her words settling on his chest. His mind flicked to the ancient scrolls and maps scattered across his table, filled with warnings of powers that defied reason. The amulet was no ordinary artifact. It wasn't just a tool of legend, it was a vessel for unimaginable power, capable of reshaping reality itself. And if the wrong hands wielded it, the consequences would be catastrophic. "You think I can still stop them?" he asked, his voice carrying a trace of skepticism. "Even after all these years, after everything that's happened?" Clara nodded, her determination unwavering. "Your knowledge, your experience, it's all we have left. You've fought this battle before. You've seen what happens when power is unchecked. And you didn't back down then. You can't back down now." Ethan was silent for a long moment, the weight of her gaze pressing into him. He thought of his last encounter with the artifact, how close it had come to unraveling everything. How many had paid the price for that power? The world was not kind to those who sought to control forces beyond their grasp. Yet, standing in the face of Clara's trust, he felt a stirring he hadn't anticipated, an old fire rekindling in the ashes of his past. "I can't guarantee I'll succeed," Ethan said finally, his voice steady despite the storm within. "But I'll do everything I can to protect what's left." He rose slowly from his seat, his old bones creaking with the movement. The firelight cast long shadows across the room, reflecting the depth of the challenge ahead. This amulet, this darkness, it won't be easy to stop. But if there's even a sliver of hope, we'll find it together. Clara's face lit with relief, and for the first time, the weight seemed to lift from her shoulders, if only slightly. She had reached the man who once held the world in his grasp, and though time had dulled his edge, the truth was clear. Ethan Wilder had not abandoned the fight. Ethan knelt to her eye level, his weathered hands resting lightly on his knees, the firelight casting flickering shadows across his face. The cabin, though warm and inviting, seemed to press in around them, amplifying the weight of the moment. Years of experience, loss, and quiet moments of reflection pressed down on him, making every breath heavier. Yet, despite his age and the weariness that came with it, something about Clara's unwavering gaze stirred an old flame, a reminder of the man he once was, a man who had chased the unknown with a reckless intensity. "Clara," he began, his voice low and measured, filled with the caution of someone who had seen too much. "Treasure hunting isn't like the stories you read in books. It's dangerous. Dangerous in ways you can't fully understand. People don't return unchanged. The dangers out there aren't just beasts or traps, they're far more sinister. There are things that defy explanation, forces that bend reality and morality alike. You have to be ready for that." Her voice was steady, unwavering. "So is doing nothing," she said, her words cutting through the weight of his warnings with precision. "If we stand by and let it happen, if we let the darkness take hold, it won't just be dangerous. It'll be devastating. My father knew that better than anyone, and he chose to fight, even when the odds were against him. Ethan's brow furrowed deeply as he listened. His mind flicked back to the times he had stood at the edge of ruin, peering into the abyss of forgotten knowledge. The shadow of those moments loomed large, visions of places where men's souls had been lost to the pursuit of forbidden power. He had promised himself he would never return to that path, yet here he was, drawn back into a world where the stakes were unimaginable. "You're young," he said softly, his voice thick with the weight of his own regret. "You don't know what you're getting into. This isn't just a battle for an artifact. It's a fight against something more profound, something insidious. A darkness that doesn't play by rules, that doesn't care about heroes or legends. It consumes everything in its path." "I know exactly what I'm getting into," Clara responded firmly, her gaze unwavering. "You're not the only one who has seen the power of the amulet. My father showed me. He warned me. And still, he chose to face it. He chose to fight. And I will too." Ethan's breath hitched as memories surged through him. Visions of the ancient tombs they had explored, of the secrets they uncovered that should have been left untouched. The amulet wasn't just a relic, it was a gateway to unimaginable forces, a vessel capable of shifting the very fabric of existence. And now, with Clara standing before him, that dangerous truth was no longer confined to the past. It was breathing once more, looming in the shadows. "Your father believed in you," Ethan said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "Even when he knew the risks, even when he saw the destruction it could bring, he believed there was something within you that could withstand it. But it's not just about bravery, Clara. It's about understanding the cost, the sacrifices you might have to make along the way. Sometimes stepping back isn't an option," Clara replied softly, yet with the same firm resolve. "Sometimes you have to fight because if you don't, the cost will be too great for everyone. Ignoring it won't erase the danger. It will only let it fester." Ethan closed his eyes briefly, his mind replaying the faces of those lost to the very darkness Clara spoke of. He thought of the ruins where ancient magic had claimed his companions, their screams echoing in his ears even after the passage of time. He had survived those moments, but at what cost? A part of him had died with them, his youth, his innocence, his sense of purpose. Yet here Clara was, igniting a spark that refused to be snuffed out. "I can't guarantee you'll survive this," Ethan said at last, his voice steady but weighted with sorrow. "But I won't let you face it alone. That much, I can promise." Clara's expression softened, her eyes glistening with a mixture of hope and sadness. A quiet smile formed at the corners of her lips, a faint light shining through the darkness that had enveloped the room. "Then we'll fight together," she said simply, yet her words carried a sense of resolve that echoed in the stillness. Ethan let out a breath, his shoulders relaxing just a fraction. The fire flickered brighter, the warmth of its glow spreading through the room like a small beacon of hope in a world on the brink of chaos. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of his promises lift, at least slightly. Ethan smiled faintly, his weathered face showing a hint of approval despite the storm of thoughts raging inside him. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, the only sound in the otherwise quiet cabin. Clara sat across from him, her gaze steady and unwavering. Her youth was a sharp contrast to the gravity of the situation, yet it was that very determination that tugged at something deep inside him, a reminder of the man he once was, before the world had beaten him down with its secrets and betrayals. "You've got guts, kid," Ethan said, his voice low and measured, as if speaking the words aloud solidified the moment. "All right, let's find this relic. But you follow my rules, understood?" Clara nodded without hesitation, her expression one of resolve. "I understand, Mr. Wilder," she said firmly. "I'll stick to what you say." Ethan leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking softly beneath his weight, his eyes fixed on the flames as the memories began to surface. Memories of a time when risks were high, when every step forward was laced with danger. The thrill of discovery was once an intoxicating force, but as the years piled up, so did the losses. He had seen the cost firsthand, the erosion of trust, the gnawing fear that came with venturing into the unknown. Every step into darkness felt like stepping onto a razor's edge. "You'll need more than just guts," Ethan continued, his voice quieter now, contemplative. "You'll need patience. You'll need to listen. And most importantly, you'll need to understand that not every fight is one worth winning." Clara's gaze didn't waver. "I get it," she said again, her tone calm but firm. "But I'm not walking away from this. If we don't do something, the cost will be greater than we can imagine." Ethan's expression softened briefly, but his eyes held a depth of experience that couldn't be ignored. "You've got the fire of your father, no doubt about that. But there are things out there that don't just take lives, they consume souls. And even the strongest wills can be shattered in the face of that." A heavy silence fell between them as the weight of those words settled into the room. Clara's breath hitched slightly, but she pressed her lips together, swallowing the fear. She had spent years hearing her father's warnings about the dangers they might face. Yet, despite the knowledge of what was at stake, despite the loss she had already endured, turning back wasn't an option. "You're young," Ethan said after a moment, his voice a touch gentler now. "There's a fire in you that burns bright, but sometimes, even fire needs to be tempered." Clara's jaw clenched. "And sometimes, if you wait too long, the fire goes out altogether," she replied, her voice steady. "Doing nothing won't stop them from getting the amulet. They'll take it, and then what? It's not just about protecting one artifact. It's about what they'll do next. They'll keep going until there's nothing left." Ethan sighed deeply, the weight of her words pressing into his chest. The cabin felt smaller now, tighter, as if the walls themselves were closing in on the fragile alliance they were forming. His mind drifted back to his own younger days, reckless, driven by the thrill of the hunt, the lure of the unknown. But he had paid a heavy price for those choices, and he had promised himself, time and time again, that he wouldn't let anyone else suffer the way he had. "You've got that fire," he said slowly, his gaze locking onto hers again. "But you'll need more than just fire. You'll need to be smarter than they expect. You'll need to outmaneuver them before they even know what you're doing. There's no room for mistakes." Clara smiled faintly. "Then I'll make no mistakes." Ethan gave a soft nod. "You'd better not." The room fell into silence once more, but this time, there was a sense of understanding between them. Ethan knew that this wasn't just about reclaiming a relic. This was about something far more personal, something that went beyond treasure hunting. For Clara, it was a battle for her father's legacy, for justice, and for the people who would suffer if the artifact fell into the wrong hands. For Ethan, it was a final chance to atone for his past, to guide someone who still believed in hope, even if that hope was dangerous. "All right," he said finally, his voice firm but measured. "We'll find the relic. But we do it my way." Clara's smile grew stronger, her confidence shining through the storm of uncertainties and warnings. "Deal," she said simply, the word carrying an unspoken promise of her own. A promise to herself, to her father, and to the countless others who couldn't afford to lose what was at stake. Ethan studied her for a moment longer, a flicker of respect passing between them. There was no turning back now. Their journey began in the dense jungles of South America, where the map led them to a hidden temple that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The air was thick with the scent of rich, earthy soil mixed with the faint, almost mystical aroma of ancient wood and stone. Every step they took echoed through the stillness of the jungle, breaking the silence that had endured for centuries. Ethan moved forward with a steady, deliberate pace, his hands brushing away thick vines and gnarled roots that threatened to block their way. His eyes, sharp and keen, scanned the dense foliage and the shadows it cast, searching for the signs of old paths, forgotten artifacts, or the dangers that might lie ahead. Beside him, Clara followed with unwavering focus. Her mind, like a well-tuned compass, guided her through the maze of symbols and clues etched into her father's weathered journal. Each page, faded but indelible, held secrets long forgotten. Secrets that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of a world long past. Her fingers traced the lines of ancient sketches, her brow furrowed as she pieced together the fragments of history, connecting dots that no one else could see. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with, a blend of seasoned expertise and youthful determination. Every step deeper into the jungle brought with it a deeper sense of isolation and reverence. The temple was not merely a relic of the past. It felt alive, as if it were guarding its secrets fiercely against intruders. The dense canopy above swayed gently in the breeze, creating a constant shifting of shadows that danced over the weathered stones of the temple's facade. Ethan's breath caught in his throat more than once, a mix of awe and caution. He had seen many ruins before, but none felt so untouched by the modern world. This place, as though carved from the heart of the jungle itself, was unlike any other he had encountered. The deeper we go, the more this place feels alive, Clara murmured, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking louder might disturb something ancient and sacred. Ethan's gaze met hers, and for a moment, they shared a quiet understanding. "There's a reason this temple has remained hidden," he said, his voice low and measured. "No one stumbles upon something like this by accident. It's been protected by more than nature. It's been protected by those who understand the cost of discovery." Clara nodded, her resolve firm. "Then we can't afford to make mistakes. We have to get in, find what we're looking for, and leave quickly." Ethan let out a slow breath, his fingers tightening around the handle of his machete. "Agreed. But we'll move cautiously. The jungle has a way of swallowing the unwary." The path ahead grew even more treacherous as they approached the temple. Thick vines hung like curtains, obscuring any clear view, while twisted roots seemed to reach out from the earth to grasp at their feet. Ethan's years of experience gave him an edge, but even he wasn't immune to the whispers of danger that rustled through the undergrowth. Clara, on the other hand, seemed to draw strength from the very heart of the jungle, her senses heightened as though she could feel the presence of ancient forces guiding them forward. "We're close," Clara whispered, her voice sharper now, as though sensing the proximity of something powerful. Her fingers, delicate yet confident, traced over the weathered stones near the temple entrance. These symbols, they're more than just decoration. They tell a story. Ethan followed her gaze, his brow furrowed as he examined the carvings that adorned the stone walls. "It's a history we may not be ready to uncover," he murmured half to himself, but Clara heard him clearly. "I don't have a choice," she said quietly, her voice firm with conviction. "We're not just here for the artifact. We're here for the truth." With every passing moment, the air grew heavier with the weight of the temple's history. The very stones seemed to hum with the energy of countless generations who had sought to unearth its secrets. Ethan's sense of caution deepened, and yet, he couldn't deny the allure of discovery that shimmered just beyond reach. Together, they stood at the brink of something ancient, something neither of them fully understood, but both felt compelled to pursue. "We'll find it," Ethan said after a pause, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts racing through his mind. "But we'll do it with care. The jungle won't give up its secrets easily." Clara gave a small nod, her expression fierce and determined. "No, it won't. But we have no choice but to push forward." Side by side, they moved closer to the hidden depths of the temple, their bond forged not just through years of shared adventure, but through the understanding that some paths are meant to be walked alone, and some are meant to be traversed together, no matter how perilous the journey may be. Inside the temple, they encountered a series of intricate puzzles and ancient traps that seemed to test every ounce of their resolve. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the faint rustle of unseen movements in the shadows. The weight of history pressed heavily upon them, each step deeper into the temple revealing more secrets and more dangers. One particular room was unlike anything they had faced before, a floor composed entirely of shifting tiles that seemed to shift beneath their feet in an eerie, rhythmic dance. Each tile could tilt, slide, or disappear at a moment's notice, making the room a deadly maze of uncertainty. Ethan moved cautiously, his eyes scanning the floor and walls with a practiced ease, his mind racing through the possibilities. Decades of experience had taught him to trust his instincts, yet the sheer complexity of this place tested even his formidable abilities. Every few seconds, a tile would shift under his weight, sending a tremor through the room. The faint scraping sounds of ancient mechanisms seemed to echo louder than the cautious steps they took, amplifying the sense of danger lurking just beyond reach. Clara, however, was the one who noticed the subtle patterns beneath their feet. Her quick mind pieced together the significance of the shifting tiles as they subtly mirrored the constellations from her father's journal. The pages were filled with detailed sketches and precise star maps, each constellation meticulously linked to ancient symbols and forgotten lore. With a steady hand, she flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the celestial figures, and her breath quickened as she aligned the star formations with the floor beneath her. "Look," she whispered, her voice steady yet awed, "the tiles. They're following the same star configurations. It's in the journal." He mapped it out. Her fingers trembled slightly as they traced the symbols in the worn pages. Ethan's gaze sharpened as he examined the floor more closely. "You're right," he murmured, his voice low. "It's the same constellations, shifted slightly, but they're guiding us." His brow furrowed as he contemplated the implications. "If we move carefully, following the stars beneath our feet, we might avoid triggering the traps." Clara nodded, her mind racing through the calculations necessary to navigate the shifting tiles. "We have to be precise. One wrong step, and we're done for." Ethan studied the pattern carefully, his years of fieldwork lending him an intuitive understanding of ancient puzzles. "Focus," he said firmly, his voice a steady command. "We've come too far to falter now. One step out of sync could end everything." Together, they began moving across the room, each step measured and deliberate. Ethan's steady pace mirrored Clara's sharp focus, both relying on years of experience and the cryptic wisdom her father had left behind. The shifting tiles responded to their movements, subtly tilting and sliding as they carefully navigated the increasingly unstable floor. The patterns were maddening, ever-changing yet eerily consistent once deciphered. The tension built with every movement. With each tile beneath their feet, a sense of danger grew, threatening to swallow them into the unknown depths of the temple. Clara's fingers continued to brush the pages of her father's journal, aligning each constellation with the patterns on the shifting tiles. The connection between the ancient sky and the hidden pathways was undeniable. A brilliant piece of lost knowledge, passed down through generations and finally put to use in their quest. "Almost there," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. He could sense the end of the room approaching, the final stretch where their efforts would be tested one last time. The weight of the moment pressed down on him like a mantle, each step forward bringing them closer to something extraordinary, or something perilous. Clara's breathing was steady, her mind locked in a state of calculated concentration. "A few more steps. We can do this." Her voice, though soft, was firm and unwavering, a reflection of her unyielding determination to honor her father's legacy. As they reached the last row of tiles, the tension peaked. The shifting slowed, and for a moment, the stars beneath their feet aligned perfectly. Ethan and Clara moved together in perfect synchronization, their synchronized step across the final threshold, guided by the ancient knowledge they both carried. A quiet stillness settled over the room, the shifting tiles now static beneath them. Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, a faint smile playing at the corner of his lips. Clara exhaled softly, her gaze steady on the path ahead. Together, they had outmaneuvered the ancient dangers, using the knowledge left by her father to guide them through. Their partnership had proven stronger than the puzzles, their determination sharper than the traps, and as they moved forward, the weight of their quest continued to grow, pushing them deeper into the mysteries of the temple. Ethan chuckled softly, the sound low and warm, a reminder of countless nights spent in silence by the fire, sharing stories that had shaped their lives. "Smart kid," he said, ruffling her hair gently, the motion both soothing and familiar. His rough, weathered hand, calloused from years of gripping ropes and exploring uncharted territories, ran through her hair, and for a moment, the years seemed to fall away, as if they were once again those young explorers, standing shoulder to shoulder against the unknown. Clara smiled up at him, her youthful energy radiating with a confidence that belied her age. "You're not too bad yourself, for an old guy," she quipped with a playful wink, her tone light-hearted yet filled with meaning. Her sharp wit had always been her armor, a way to cut through the weight of the moment and keep the tension at bay. But beneath her playful exterior, Ethan could see the fire, her determination, her relentless curiosity, and her refusal to back down in the face of adversity. "You've got a quick tongue, I'll give you that," Ethan replied, the corners of his mouth twitching into a broader smile. "But there's more to this than just clever remarks, you know." His voice grew more measured, the humor fading into something deeper, something more serious. He had seen too much, lived through too many perilous adventures to brush off their current journey with mere banter. Every step forward, every clue they uncovered, was fraught with peril, and there were no guarantees of success. Clara's playful expression faltered for a moment, her gaze drifting toward the shadows cast by the flickering torches on the temple walls. "I know," she said quietly, her voice a gentle whisper in the stillness. "But my dad always told me that courage isn't just about surviving, it's about standing up to the darkness." Her words carried the weight of truth, shaped by years of loss and the unyielding pursuit of knowledge. It was a truth Ethan had long understood but had struggled to pass on. How easily the light of hope could flicker when faced with overwhelming odds. Ethan's smile softened further, his eyes reflecting the ancient wisdom gained from countless battles fought against the unknown. "You've got his fire, that's for sure," he murmured, his voice rich with a mixture of pride and regret. "But sometimes that fire can burn too bright, it consumes everything in its path." He watched her carefully, studying the resolve that hardened her features, the way her grip on the journal tightened, as though the very pages contained the answers they sought. Clara nodded slowly, her expression serious yet resolute. "I know," she said again, her voice steady. "But that's why you're here, to help me keep it in check." Her tone wasn't desperate or arrogant. It was measured, confident in the understanding that together they could weather the trials ahead. "You've been through this before, haven't you? More times than you can count." She looked up at him with a level gaze, one that wasn't asking for answers but seeking guidance from someone who had walked the same path. Ethan met her eyes with a quiet intensity. "I've seen more darkness than most," he admitted softly, the weight of his past etched into his every word. "And not all of it can be outmaneuvered with cleverness or quick thinking. There are forces that defy logic, ancient, primal forces that feed on fear and uncertainty. You've got courage, but sometimes courage alone isn't enough." His voice trailed off, the memories flooding back, of battles lost and risks taken that had left lasting scars on his soul. Clara's expression was unwavering. "Then we face it together," she said firmly, her voice unwavering in its resolve. "We've come this far. There's no turning back now." Her words echoed through the chamber, a rallying cry for both of them, a testament to the strength forged in shared hardship. She had made her choice, and no amount of fear could sway her. Ethan gave a slow nod, a somber smile playing at his lips. "Together," he echoed, his voice a solemn promise. "But remember, it's not just about surviving the danger, it's about protecting what matters most." His gaze softened as he looked at her, the bond between them growing stronger with each passing second. They stood there in the heart of the temple, knowing the road ahead was fraught with uncertainty, yet determined to see it through, to honor the legacy of those who had come before and forge a path forward, no matter how perilous it might be. They laughed, the sound breaking the oppressive silence that had settled over the ancient temple. It was a fleeting moment of relief, a temporary respite from the weight of uncertainty. But the laughter was short-lived. The echoes of their amusement seemed to linger in the air for only a heartbeat before fading, replaced by something far more ominous. A low, rumbling murmur began to seep into the atmosphere, a chorus of voices rising from the depths of the temple corridors. At first distant, the voices quickly grew louder, each echo carrying with it a sense of purpose and menace. The walls trembled ever so slightly with each passing second, as if the very stones were whispering warnings to those who dared to linger. Clara tightened her grip on the weathered journal, her knuckles whitening against the worn leather cover. The journal, a connection to her father and the knowledge he had accumulated, was her lifeline in this desperate moment. Her breath hitched as the mercenaries' voices drew nearer, each word sharper, more deliberate. Fear flickered behind her steady gaze, but it was swiftly masked by determination. Ethan's sharp eyes scanned their surroundings, his mind working overtime to assess their options. The mercenaries were no mere amateurs. They were relentless, experienced hunters who had pursued relics through the most dangerous terrains known to man. And now, they were closing in. Every step they took seemed to bring the danger closer, their paths converging with an inevitability that was impossible to ignore. "They're close," Ethan said quietly, his voice steady yet tinged with urgency. He knew the signs well. Each step, each breath could be their last. He had faced countless threats in the past, but this felt different. This wasn't just a race to secure a prize. It was a battle for survival. The temple, once a source of wonder, had transformed into a labyrinth of peril. Clara's jaw tightened as her mind raced through possibilities. The thought of her father's legacy falling into the wrong hands drove her forward, spurring a resolve that refused to waver. "We can't let them take it," she said, her voice firm with conviction. "This isn't just about history, it's about what happens after. What happens to people if they get their hands on that amulet?" Ethan's expression was grim. He knew the weight of her words. The amulet, according to legend, held unimaginable power, capable of shifting the balance of entire civilizations. In the wrong hands, it could ignite wars, unleash chaos, and destroy countless lives. "We fight," Ethan said, his voice low but unwavering. "We use the knowledge we have and outmaneuver them at every turn. But it's not going to be easy." His eyes flickered towards a distant corridor, where shadows flickered and danced in the torchlight. Every movement felt deliberate, each sound a trap in itself. They pressed forward, every step deliberate, every shadow scrutinized. The temple had once been a place of awe and reverence, filled with relics of ancient civilizations, but now it was a dangerous maze, a stage where history and peril converged. Clara's quick thinking and resourcefulness were invaluable, while Ethan's experience carved a path through the chaos. The air grew thick with tension as they moved deeper into the temple. Their breaths came shorter, their steps quieter, yet the sound of their own heartbeat throbbed louder than ever before. Shadows flickered in the corners of their vision, fleeting glimpses of figures lurking in the distance, a reminder of the mercenaries closing in. Clara's voice broke the silence once more. "If they catch us here, if they get the journal, if they take the amulet," her words trailed off, but the weight of her unspoken fears hung in the air. Her hands trembled with the thought of what could happen next, but she refused to let it consume her. Ethan reached out and placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, offering a silent reassurance. "We'll keep moving. One step at a time," he said softly. "They'll have to pry that journal from your hands first." For every step they took forward, the temple seemed to stretch its labyrinthine grasp further. The danger was relentless, and with every echo of the approaching voices, the stakes became clearer. Survival was no longer an option, it was the only goal. At last, they reached the grand chamber where the amulet rested, glowing faintly on an ancient pedestal. The room was vast and dimly lit, its walls lined with intricate carvings that told tales of gods and forgotten empires. The air was thick with the scent of dust and the weight of centuries past, a silent witness to countless generations who had sought this very place. Shadows flickered against the stone, casting elongated shapes across the floor, while the quiet hum of the amulet's faint glow created an almost mystical ambience. Clara's breath caught in her throat as she stepped closer, drawn by the sheer presence of the artifact. The pedestal, ancient and worn, seemed to absorb the light, as if holding its secrets deep within. Each detail of the amulet was mesmerizing, a swirling design etched into its surface, symbols that seemed to shift and pulse ever so slightly, as though alive. The glow radiated a gentle warmth, yet beneath its beauty lay an undeniable sense of power, a force that whispered of ancient magic and dangers long forgotten. Her fingers hesitated just above the surface of the amulet, the hum of its energy a living entity against her skin. Every instinct told her to pull back, to shield herself from whatever was radiating from it, but a deeper curiosity kept her frozen. She could feel the connection, a thread woven through time that linked the present to forgotten realms, as if history itself was urging her to embrace its unknown depths. Ethan stood a few steps away, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings with practiced precision. Though his mind was as alert as hers, there was a calmness about him, a steady determination born from years of facing the unknown. His hands rested loosely at his sides, but every muscle was prepared for action. He knew the danger, not only of the mercenaries closing in fast, but also of the temptation the amulet held. It wasn't just the artifact's power they had to guard against, it was the possibility of corruption that could twist even the strongest of hearts. "We've come too far," Ethan murmured, his voice low and steady, breaking the thick silence. "Too many have fought and died for this moment. We can't let it slip through our fingers." Clara's eyes locked onto his. "They won't stop, will they?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the weight of her question hung heavy in the air. "No," Ethan responded firmly. "They never do. Once they taste the promise of such power, they become relentless. But we won't let them have it." The shadows along the edges of the chamber deepened as if responding to their declaration. The mercenaries were closing in fast, their footsteps echoing through the halls, and the tension thickened like a storm waiting to break. Clara felt the weight of their mission pressing down on her chest, but alongside the fear was a growing resolve, a conviction that they were meant to protect what few dared to protect. "We'll have to outsmart them," Ethan said, his voice sharp and commanding. "Every step we take, every decision we make has to be calculated. They'll try to divide us, break us down mentally and physically, but we can't let that happen." Clara nodded, her mind racing with solutions, yet remaining eerily calm. She had always known the danger that lay ahead, but now, faced with it head-on, there was no room for hesitation. The memory of her father's unwavering belief in Ethan strengthened her resolve. She remembered his final message, whispered through the pages of the journal he left behind. "You are the key, both to the amulet and to stopping them. Together, you are the only ones who can protect it. Together." The word echoed in her mind, binding her to Ethan not just as allies but as partners in a desperate mission. "You know what they'll do," Clara said, her voice steady and unwavering. "They'll try to separate us. They'll try to break us down, piece by piece. But we'll keep moving forward, no matter what." Ethan gave her a rare, approving smile, one that spoke volumes more than words. "We've walked through fire before. This isn't our first battle, and it sure as hell won't be our last. But we've got each other, and that's what matters most." Their eyes locked again, an unspoken promise passed between them as the mercenaries drew closer, their shadows stretching long across the floor. In that moment, as the chamber echoed with the hum of the ancient artifact, they knew the real challenge had just begun. The fight wasn't only for the amulet, it was for the legacy of those who had come before them and the lives they would save by protecting it. "Is it true?" she asked. "Can it make someone invincible?" Ethan hesitated, his fingers brushing lightly against the surface of the amulet. The room seemed to dim even further, shadows creeping into the corners like a living entity. The air grew heavy, thick with an unspoken tension. "Maybe," he murmured, his voice low and contemplative. "But power like that always comes at a cost." Clara's gaze didn't waver. She knew the truth behind his words. Nothing of such magnitude could be obtained without sacrifice. Whether it was losing a piece of your soul, unraveling your sanity, or condemning countless lives to a darker fate, the price was always steep. She swallowed hard, the weight of her father's mission pressing heavily on her chest. The amulet wasn't just a relic, it was a symbol of untold danger, of the fine line between salvation and destruction. Ethan's hand tightened around the edge of the pedestal, his grip steady despite the tremors in the air. His eyes flicked upward, scanning the shadows that crept across the stone walls. He knew the black shadows wouldn't waste time pondering morality. They were here for one thing, and one thing only: control. "And if someone takes the risk?" Clara asked, her voice unwavering, despite the fear that flickered in her expression. "What happens then?" "Then," Ethan said grimly, "they either become a legend, or a ghost." Before she could respond, the chamber was abruptly filled with the echoing crash of the doors slamming open. The black shadows burst into the room, their dark cloaks swirling around them, their blades glinting ominously in the dim light. At the forefront, Vargas, the leader of the mercenaries, stepped into view. His tall, imposing figure was adorned with battle scars that told tales of countless battles. A wicked smirk stretched across his face, his dark eyes gleaming with a hunger for power. "Ah," Vargas drawled, his voice cold and calculating. "Ethan Wilder. And you brought a little helper, I see." His gaze settled on Clara, narrowing as if assessing the threat she posed. "How quaint." Ethan's expression remained stoic, his hands slowly lowering from the pedestal, his mind racing to find a way out of the escalating chaos. "Vargas," he said, his tone firm, "this ends here. You'll get nothing." Vargas's smirk deepened. "You speak of endings as if you have the power to control them. You're a fool if you think you can stop us. We'll have the amulet, with or without your help." The room trembled with the weight of impending conflict. Clara clutched the edge of the pedestal tighter, her breath hitching as she felt the intense, almost unbearable pressure in the air. The amulet seemed to hum louder, as though responding to the chaos, pulsing with an otherworldly energy that radiated off both the artifact and the danger surrounding it. "You can't let them take it," Ethan said sharply, his gaze shifting between Clara and the approaching threat. "You understand what this means. Not just for us, but for everyone." Clara nodded, her resolve unwavering despite the pounding in her chest. "I'm ready," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at the edges of her mind. "Let's finish this." Ethan reached into the depths of his old bag, pulling out an ancient dagger, a relic passed down through generations of treasure hunters. Its blade shimmered with a faint, eerie light, hinting at ancient magic hidden within. He held it steady in his hand, knowing it would be their last line of defense against the overwhelming force before them. "Then let's fight," Ethan said, his voice a low, fierce growl, as the room became a battlefield of steel and shadows. The clash was deafening, each strike of blade against blade reverberating through the stone chamber, each moment a desperate battle for survival. Shadows danced wildly on the walls, and the weight of their enemy's power pressed down like an invisible force, threatening to crush them beneath its suffocating grip. Clara moved with precision, her mind sharp and her every move calculated. She had trained for this, had read through her father's notes more times than she could count. Every puzzle, every strategy etched into the ancient journal fueled her determination. Her small form was a fierce contrast to the ferocity of the battle, but her heart burned with a purpose that made her a formidable ally. Ethan, too, had faced countless perils in his years of treasure hunting, but this was different. This wasn't about treasure. It was a battle for what lay beyond the surface, for a power that could reshape the world. His breaths came heavy, each swing of his dagger more taxing than the last, but his resolve remained unyielding. Together, they pushed back the tide of darkness, their combined strength proving to be the only chance against the overwhelming force of the black shadows. "Hand it over, Wilder, and I'll consider letting the girl go." The words hung in the air like a deathly shroud, each syllable sharp as a dagger, cutting through the oppressive silence of the ancient chamber. Ethan's eyes narrowed, his pulse quickening as his grip on the hilt of his dagger tightened. The flickering light from the glowing amulet on the pedestal cast eerie shadows that danced around the walls, reflecting the tension that filled the room. Clara stepped forward, her small form standing defiantly in front of Ethan, her delicate features hardened by the gravity of the moment. "You'll have to go through me," she declared, her voice steady and unwavering despite the enormity of the danger before her. The confidence in her stance was surprising, even to Ethan, who had watched her grow from a frightened child into a fierce young fighter. Vargas's smirk widened slightly, a flash of amusement flickering in his cold, calculating eyes. His men shifted behind him, their dark cloaks blending with the shadows, their weapons drawn. "Brave words for someone so young," Vargas said, his voice laced with mockery and disdain. "But bravery alone won't save you from what's coming." "You're wrong," Clara shot back, her voice firm and unyielding. "Courage is the only thing that can." Ethan stepped closer to her, his towering form a shield against the looming threat. "Stay behind me, Clara," he said softly but firmly. His protective instinct surged as he saw the fearless determination in her eyes, her desire to protect the artifact, her father's legacy, and the people who would suffer if it fell into the wrong hands. "This is not a fight for one," he continued, his tone measured but resolute. "It's a fight for everything." Clara didn't waver. She stood tall, her small hands clenched into fists at her sides, her breath even and deliberate despite the overwhelming odds. "It doesn't matter how many there are," she said with a fire that seemed to burn brighter than the flickering light around them. "If we fall, someone else will rise to stop them. But I won't let that happen. Not now." Vargas's amusement faded into cold calculation. "You're naive if you think mere resolve can protect you," he said, his voice colder, deadlier. "The amulet will be mine, and with it, your little rebellion will be crushed beneath the weight of its power." His men tightened their formation, advancing slowly, pressing them into a tighter space with every calculated step. Ethan's gaze flicked to the amulet, a beacon of forbidden power resting on the ancient pedestal in front of them. He knew what it symbolized, the untold strength and devastation it could unleash, but he also knew the price of that power. "Clara," he said, his voice dropping to a hushed urgency, "there's more at stake here than just us." "I don't care," she interrupted, her voice fierce. "This is about more than just power, it's about what's right. They can take the amulet from my hands, but they'll never take what it represents." Her words were unwavering, echoing through the chamber like a battle cry. Ethan took a steady breath, his mind racing through possibilities as the mercenaries closed in. "They'll overwhelm us if we don't have a plan," he said, his voice low, a hint of desperation creeping in. "We need to find a way out of this." "There is no way out," Clara said with a fierce determination. "There never was." Her gaze locked onto Vargas, her small form seeming to grow stronger despite the threat looming over her. "But that doesn't mean we'll go down without a fight." Vargas's gaze sharpened, the shadows around him deepening as his men surged forward. "You're wasting your breath, little girl," he hissed, his tone cold and merciless. "You won't stand in the way of destiny." Ethan moved instinctively, his body shielding Clara as the first wave of enemies charged. The clash of steel against steel was deafening, each strike ringing out like the heartbeat of a dying world. Sparks flew, the air thick with the scent of metal and sweat. The chamber echoed with the sound of battle, a brutal dance of survival. Through the chaos, Ethan's mind remained sharp, calculating every strike, every movement. Clara fought beside him, her small frame surprisingly agile, her mind quick and sharp. Together, they became a force to be reckoned with, a formidable team against the tide of darkness threatening to engulf them. Still, the odds were grim. Vargas and his men were relentless, pressing forward with no intention of retreat. Each clash of blades brought them closer to exhaustion, but neither Ethan nor Clara gave in. "Together!" Ethan shouted as they pushed forward, his voice slicing through the noise, reminding Clara that they were stronger united. His protective instincts were undeniable, but in that moment he saw her strength, her resilience, her unwavering spirit. Vargas's smirk returned as he pressed forward, driving them deeper into the fray. "You fight well," he admitted, a note of grudging respect in his voice. "But even the greatest warriors are destined to fall." Ethan spun around Clara, shielding her as the attack intensified. "Not today," he growled, his voice filled with unrelenting determination. "Not while we're still breathing." In the midst of chaos, Clara found her strength. "No more," she screamed, striking out with a fierce, calculated move that caught Vargas off guard. The momentum shifted slightly, giving them a momentary advantage, a breath of hope in a sea of darkness. With every strike, every defiant cry, they pushed forward, two against many, but bound by a cause greater than themselves. Together, they refused to let the darkness claim what mattered most. But Clara had a plan. She noticed intricate carvings etched into the ancient stone walls, symbols that seemed to pulse faintly with an otherworldly glow in the dim light. These carvings told a story, a ritual that spoke of a time when the amulet was created. A time when purity of heart was the only key to unlocking its true power. The symbols depicted not just a weapon of immense strength, but a beacon of hope, one that could either save or destroy depending on the intentions behind it. The deeper Ethan looked, the more he saw how meticulously crafted the imagery was, like a map leading through trials of morality and selflessness. The amulet, it seemed, was more than a physical object. It was a force that connected to the very essence of one's soul. Each detail spoke of a journey, a path paved with choices that tested the boundaries of integrity and sacrifice. Whispering to Ethan, her voice low but steady, Clara said, "The amulet can only be used by someone pure of heart. That's why my dad wanted you to have it." Her words hung in the air, a revelation that made Ethan's breath catch in his throat. The idea seemed impossible. How could he, with his rugged past and years of danger, embody such purity? Yet, there was something undeniable in her tone, something that made him pause and reflect. "They say the amulet was forged not just for power," Clara continued, her voice soft but unwavering, "but for those who carry the courage to use it selflessly. My father believed that you were the only one who could resist the temptations it offers, the one who could wield it without being consumed by its influence." Ethan stared at the carvings, the weight of her words pressing down on him. The symbols seemed to pulse now, as if alive, guiding them toward a truth he hadn't fully considered. Could it really be true? Could he be worthy of such a powerful artifact, despite a life filled with regret and sacrifice? "I don't know if I can do this," Ethan admitted, his voice a whisper of uncertainty. "Power like that? No, it's dangerous." "Then you're not alone," Clara said, her gaze meeting his, steady and resolute. "It's not about what you can do alone, it's about what you can do together. We don't have to face this burden on our own." The thought of shared responsibility settled into Ethan's mind, and for the first time, he allowed the idea of partnership, not just between themselves, but with something far greater, to take root. The carvings seemed to reflect their combined destiny, showing not just the use of the amulet, but a journey of unity and sacrifice. "But if you use it," Clara added, her voice quieter now, more introspective, "you have to accept the cost. It's not just about power. It's about what you're willing to give up, what you're willing to fight for." Ethan's fingers brushed the cold stone, feeling the depth of the ancient markings beneath his fingertips. A chill ran down his spine as he processed her words, understanding the weight of the responsibility she was entrusting to him. "I fought battles before," he said, his voice steady with resolve, "but never like this." He looked down at Clara, her expression calm yet filled with fierce determination. "We'll face whatever comes together." Together, they would step forward into the unknown, their hearts bound by the legacy of sacrifice, the hope of redemption, and the promise of a future where power was wielded not for destruction, but for salvation. Every step forward brought them closer to the edge of a destiny they couldn't yet fully comprehend, but one they knew was meant for them. Ethan nodded, his mind racing with both trust and a lingering sense of uncertainty. Clara's instincts had always been razor-sharp, but this time, there was something different, something deeper. Together, their hands trembled slightly as they reached toward the glowing pedestal, the amulet's energy pulsing with a raw, ancient force that seemed to echo through time itself. As the ritual began, the chamber was consumed by a brilliant, blinding light. A light that felt alive, breathing with an ancient power long forgotten. The walls of the temple shuddered as the energy built around them, the very stones seeming to hum with the weight of countless generations. Shadows flickered across the surface of the massive stone pillars, their forms distorted and fleeting in the overwhelming glow. Ethan could feel the room shifting, the air becoming heavier with the intensity of the magic. His fingers tightened around Clara's, a silent promise of solidarity, even in the face of such overwhelming power. The mercenaries, frozen by the sheer magnitude of the light, began to scatter. Their leader, Vargas, stood his ground, his towering form silhouetted against the radiant burst of energy. But his determination quickly turned to desperation as he realized he was powerless against the overwhelming protection the ritual created. His cold, calculating gaze turned wild with rage, and he lunged forward, his hands outstretched, a desperate attempt to seize the amulet. Yet, as he reached the pedestal, the air itself seemed to recoil from his touch. A barrier of shimmering light surged between him and the artifact, pushing him back with force that was impossible to resist. Vargas hit the ground hard, his body crashing onto the unforgiving stone floor. A guttural cry escaped his lips, a mixture of pain and fury, but the light enveloped him, keeping him at bay, stripping him of control. The chamber echoed with the sounds of the mercenaries' chaos, some fleeing in terror, others dropping to their knees, overwhelmed by the sheer power of the energy. Ethan felt a surge of pride watching Clara, her face set with fierce determination as she held firm, her resolve unwavering. Together, they were a team, two forces balanced between past and present, old wisdom and new hope. Clara's voice broke through the din. "We have to keep going," she said, her words steady and resolute despite the storm of magic swirling around them. Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on the shimmering light that continued to grow, each pulse a declaration of their unity against the darkness. The ritual was more than a simple protection. It was a force of renewal, of balance. The light wasn't meant to destroy, but to purify, to shield not just themselves but the world from those who sought to twist power for personal gain. The temple itself seemed alive, a vessel for something ancient and pure, guiding their actions with a higher purpose. Vargas struggled against the light, his voice rising in a final, desperate plea. "You can't control this. You'll all burn for this," he shouted, his tone unraveling into madness as he realized the futility of his quest. Yet, the ritual held strong. The energy pulsed again, more intensely than before, consuming him in a tempest of radiant energy. Ethan tightened his grip on Clara's hand, his breath steady despite the overwhelming power surrounding them. The barrier was solid now, impenetrable. Vargas's screams faded into silence, lost in the hum of the ritual. The mercenaries, those still standing, bowed under the weight of the light, their wills broken as the amulet's true purpose revealed itself. A protector, not a weapon. As the final moments approached, Ethan felt the immense burden lift from his shoulders. The light began to dim, the energy returning to a more controlled state. The room settled into an eerie quiet, broken only by the sound of their breathing, the calm after the storm. Clara turned to Ethan, her eyes shining with a quiet triumph. "We did it," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "We did," Ethan agreed, his heart full with the knowledge that their journey had not been in vain. Together, they had preserved something sacred, a reminder that even the greatest powers are nothing without the purity of heart that wields them. Back at the cabin, the flickering flames of the hearth crackled softly, casting warm, golden hues across the dimly lit room. The scent of freshly brewed tea mingled with the faint aroma of aged wood, creating a comforting atmosphere that seemed to hold centuries of stories. The wooden floorboards creaked gently beneath the weight of their journey, and the air felt heavier with each passing second, carrying with it the echoes of their shared experience. Ethan carefully lowered the heavy iron key into a small, hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. His hands, roughened by years of exploration and danger, moved with deliberate care as he concealed the amulet, a relic of unimaginable power, out of sight. The faint glow of its surface disappeared beneath the floor, leaving only a faint pulse of energy that seemed to hum softly against the wood. Clara sat silently across the room, her gaze lost in the swirling depths of her teacup. The steam rising from the hot liquid curled gently into the air, blending with the soft crackling of the fire. Her thoughts drifted back to the temple, to the blinding light of the ritual, and the overwhelming sense of awe when the amulet's power had surged through the chamber. But now, in the quiet aftermath, the weight of it all pressed down more heavily than the tangible danger they had faced. The silence was a deafening reminder of how much had changed within her, a realization that no tales or stories had prepared her for. "You were right," Clara said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The words hung in the air between them, each syllable weighted with meaning. "The stories don't tell you everything." Ethan looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers with a calm intensity. There was no need for him to ask what part of the journey she was referring to. They had shared too much in the past few days for words to be necessary. Instead, he nodded in understanding, a small smile playing on his lips as if he were reflecting on memories only the two of them could fully grasp. "They never do," he replied simply, his voice a hushed but firm reminder of the realities that came with their path. Clara took a deep breath, her hands gripping the edge of the table tightly. "They make it sound like adventure is a grand tale, a thrilling race towards something tangible, a prize at the end. But it's not just about the destination, is it?" "No," Ethan said quietly, his voice steady. "It never is. The real story lies in the journey. The dangers, the decisions, the moments where you stand alone with nothing but your instincts and the knowledge you've gained along the way." She glanced out the cabin window, watching the shadows of the trees sway gently against the pale moonlight. "The books, the legends, they don't show you what it feels like when the dust settles and the world expects you to return to normal. As if nothing ever happened." Ethan stirred the contents of his teacup thoughtfully. "That's because stories are designed to inspire. They tell us what we want to hear, how to be brave, how to triumph, how to emerge stronger. But they rarely prepare us for the aftermath. The quiet moments where the weight of what you've done presses on you, and there's no grand applause, no celebration. Just the quiet reflection of what's lost." Clara's eyes filled with a new understanding, her expression soft and thoughtful. "The aftermath is the hardest part. When you've sacrificed so much, your time, your peace, your own sense of self, to achieve something others believed they couldn't dare to touch." Ethan leaned back in his chair, the faintest glimmer of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "It's the price of power, the cost of truth. Every victory carries its cost, and not everyone is ready to face that reality." She nodded slowly, absorbing his words, allowing them to sink into the quiet corners of her mind. "We talk about the grand moments, the triumphs, the discoveries, but we don't talk about the sleepless nights, the doubts, the moments where you feel more lost than found. And that's the difference," Ethan said gently. "True adventure isn't about the thrill of the chase or the glory at the end. It's about the stories we carry with us. Every lesson learned, every moment of fear faced alone, every piece of ourselves we must sacrifice along the way." Clara reached for the small journal her father had left her, its pages crinkled with age and filled with cryptic notes, symbols, and reminders of his own adventures. "I thought I knew what it meant to be part of this," she said, flipping through the pages. "But it's more than just following the path he took. It's walking the same tightrope, holding on to what little remains of him, while forging my own way." Ethan's gaze softened, the weight of his own promises and regrets evident in his expression. Your father knew that, Clara. He knew the cost of standing at the edge of danger, and he trusted you to understand it too. They sat in the quiet once more, the crackling fire the only sound filling the room. The weight of their shared history pressed on their shoulders, but in the stillness there was a newfound strength, a bond forged not just through adventure, but through the reality of what it meant to carry the legacy of those who came before them. Ethan smiled warmly, his gaze steady as he looked at Clara. "Always," he said, his voice firm, but not without a hint of vulnerability. "Together, we face whatever comes next." For a moment, the room felt still, the crackling fire casting dancing shadows across their features. The silence between them spoke volumes, a quiet understanding that had been forged through years of experience and shared hardship. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his hand resting on the worn armrest as he watched Clara thoughtfully. "You've grown stronger than I ever imagined, Clara. You're more than just a quick mind and a sharp tongue. You're brave, courageous in ways I've rarely seen." Clara's cheeks flushed, her fingers tracing the worn wooden tabletop. "You've always been the one who showed me the way," she murmured. "Without you, I wouldn't have made it this far." Ethan gave a low chuckle, shaking his head lightly. "You think too little of yourself. There's no me without you anymore. You've carved out your own path, stepped into the unknown with a determination that's hard to match." The room seemed to hum with the weight of their shared history, the quiet confidence that had settled between them growing deeper with every moment. Clara glanced up at him, her gaze steady and filled with a newfound respect and understanding. "We've faced everything life threw at us," she said quietly, "and yet, every time we think we've seen it all, there's something more." Ethan nodded slowly, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "That's the truth. The universe doesn't deal in predictability. It's wild, chaotic even. But that's where we thrive, when we stop trying to control every outcome and start embracing the uncertainty." She paused, considering his words, her mind moving quickly through the memories they had shared. "It's the uncertainty that scares most people," she said softly, "but for us, it's where we truly find ourselves." "Exactly," Ethan said. "The moments of fear, of doubt, they aren't setbacks, they're opportunities for growth. Every time we've doubted, we've come out stronger on the other side." Clara exhaled slowly, the weight of their journey resting heavy on her shoulders. "It feels different this time, though. The stakes are higher. This isn't just about uncovering a relic or solving a mystery, it's about protecting people. Real lives are at risk." Ethan's expression hardened, his voice dropping to a more serious tone. "It always has been about protecting people. It's never been just about the glory or the riches. That was a part of it, sure, but the heart of this, of what we do, is to ensure that we leave this world a little better than we found it, even if it means risking everything." Ethan nodded slowly, his gaze locking with hers. "Even if it means risking everything. That's the cost of doing what's right." Clara shifted slightly in her seat, her mind racing through the possibilities. "And when the dust settles, when the danger is gone and the mission is complete." Ethan leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle yet resolute. "Then we find peace. We rest. We heal. But we don't forget the lessons we've learned. Those stay with us." She smiled softly, her voice full of warmth. "We don't forget anything." "No," Ethan agreed, his expression softening once more. "Because everything we've been through, everything we've faced together, shapes who we are, and who we'll continue to become." The fire crackled again, the room feeling more alive with their shared understanding. For a moment, neither needed to speak, the connection between them was enough. In the quiet, they understood that no matter what came next, they'd face it together. Unbreakable, unstoppable, and always ready for the next adventure. Ethan sat quietly beside the crackling fire, the warmth from the flames radiating through the cabin, wrapping around him like an old, familiar cloak. The shadows danced across the wooden walls, creating patterns that seemed almost alive, shifting with every flicker of light. Outside, the night was still, a peaceful hum of crickets and the distant rustling of trees in the breeze. He glanced down at Clara, her head resting against the armrest of the couch, her breathing slow and steady as she drifted deeper into sleep. The firelight flickered across her face, revealing the soft, almost childlike innocence that still lingered despite the weight of their recent adventures. Her features were relaxed, the tension that once shadowed her expression now gone, replaced by a serene calm. Ethan felt his lips twitch into a faint smile. There had been many moments like this over the years, times when the world seemed to stand still, and all that mattered was the quiet between them. Yet, this felt different. It wasn't just the warmth of the fire or the comfort of familiarity. There was something more, something rare. A bond forged through shared dangers and the kind of trust that only came from knowing someone had your back no matter what. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair away from her face, his fingers lingering a little longer than necessary. The gesture was simple, perhaps even a little paternal, but it felt right in this moment. Like it was something he needed to do. Something they both needed. Ethan's gaze shifted toward the cabin's small window, where the night sky was scattered with stars. They twinkled above, unyielding and ancient, reminding him of how small they truly were in the vastness of the universe. Yet, despite the vastness, in this tiny cabin tucked away from the chaos of the outside world, everything felt just right. Everything felt secure. He let out a soft sigh, the kind that was a mixture of contentment and the weight of memories past. There were no grand plans in his mind now, no maps to follow, no relics to uncover. Just the quiet simplicity of the moment, of knowing they had accomplished something that couldn't easily be measured. The silence deepened, but it wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. Ethan allowed himself to bask in it, the warmth of the fire burning steadily as the shadows continued to shift across the room. His thoughts drifted, but they always returned to Clara, to the girl who had braved danger with him, who had faced down mercenaries and puzzles, who had come to him in her hour of need and showed a courage far beyond her years. "You've earned this," he murmured quietly to himself, though it was meant for her as well. Every moment of rest, every second of peace. The thought brought a deeper sense of gratitude than he had felt in years. His old bones may have creaked with each movement, but his heart, it felt lighter. It was in this rare, simple moment that he understood. Sometimes, the greatest adventures weren't the ones you sought out, but the ones you were called to endure together. The fire crackled again, the sound filling the space between them, amplifying the serenity of the moment. He glanced down once more, watching Clara sleep soundly, her breaths slow and even. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt the weight of his years lift just slightly, as though the world outside could wait a little longer. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, sending small bursts of warmth through the room. Outside, the wind howled against the cabin's walls, but inside, the quiet was almost peaceful. Ethan sat in his well-worn chair, his fingers lightly tracing the edges of a map that lay on his lap. Every line, every curve, held stories and secrets from countless expeditions, each one a chapter in the life he had lived. Yet tonight, there was a different weight in the air. Tonight, it wasn't just about old adventures or forgotten treasures. It was about something more, something new. Across the room, Clara lay curled up under a thick woolen blanket. Her dark hair framed her pale, tranquil face, her breaths even and steady. Ethan watched her with a soft smile, the flickering light from the fire reflecting in his eyes. Her presence filled the space in a way nothing else could, a reminder of where they had been, and perhaps where they were going. For years, Ethan had been alone. A treasure hunter by trade, a wanderer by nature, he had long since resigned himself to a life without companions. The memories of his partner, Clara's father, were enough to weigh down his heart. Promises had been made, and he had kept them. The promise to never search again, to never risk his life for another relic. But now, with Clara in the room, those promises felt different. They felt heavier. The world, Ethan thought, wasn't just full of relics and artifacts. It was full of people who sought to claim them, to control them, to wield them for power. And power was dangerous. Ethan had seen it firsthand, from ruthless mercenaries to desperate seekers willing to do anything to unlock ancient secrets. He had fought those battles, survived them, but at what cost? Clara stirred slightly, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting his gaze. She smiled softly, the weight of their shared journey evident in her expression. "You were right," she murmured, her voice a hushed whisper. "The stories don't tell you everything." Ethan nodded slowly. "No, they don't." His voice was gentle, yet reflective. "But the best adventures are the ones you don't see coming." She tilted her head slightly, a playful glint in her eye. "Does this mean you're back in the game?" For a moment, Ethan chuckled quietly to himself. The sound echoed in the stillness, filling the space between them with warmth. "Not a chance," he said, though his tone held a hint of amusement. "But I might make an exception. For you." Clara grinned at his response, a mischievous sparkle lighting up her expression. "Good enough." The room fell back into a comfortable quiet, the only sound being the rhythmic crackle of the fire. Ethan continued to watch her, his thoughts wandering once more. He couldn't help but feel a sense of protection wash over him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. She wasn't just another adventurer seeking fame or fortune. Clara was something more, something rare. She wasn't just intelligent or brave, but her heart, her resolve, and her understanding of the world around her set her apart. Outside, the storm howled louder, but inside the cabin, the warmth of the fire kept the night calm. Ethan settled deeper into his chair, the weight of past years and the promise of what was yet to come settling on his shoulders. He didn't know exactly what the future held for them, but he knew this much. Clara wasn't just his apprentice or partner. She was a force to be reckoned with. She was something extraordinary. And as her breathing steadied once again, Ethan couldn't help but imagine the stories she would one day tell. The legends she would shape. The hero the world would remember. Not because of what was sought or uncovered, but because of the strength and compassion that would guide her through every challenge. For now, though, the night was theirs. A quiet moment between the past and whatever lay ahead. This story, at its core, is a powerful reminder of the virtues that define true strength. Courage, resilience, and the unyielding desire to protect what is right are central to the narrative, serving as guiding lights for both young and old alike. Courage is the ability to face fear and uncertainty head-on, even when the odds seem insurmountable. It teaches that standing firm in the face of adversity is not about physical prowess, but about the unwavering belief in justice and the courage to act on that belief. Resilience, on the other hand, speaks to the indomitable spirit that refuses to be broken, even in the face of failure or hardship. It shows that every setback is an opportunity to rise stronger, to learn from mistakes, and to move forward with greater wisdom. The story also highlights the critical importance of protecting what is right, no matter how difficult the journey may be. It illustrates that true strength lies not in power alone, but in the heart, the ability to connect with others, to understand their struggles, and to fight for a cause greater than oneself. Through Clara's unwavering determination and Ethan's seasoned guidance, the story conveys the idea that justice is not always swift or easy, but it is always worth pursuing. Moreover, the tale emphasizes the power of teamwork. No individual, no matter how capable, can face every challenge alone. True heroes are those who recognize their need for others, who collaborate, trust, and respect those who walk alongside them. The bond formed between Clara and Ethan showcases how different strengths complement one another. Wisdom, creativity, perseverance, and trust all working together to achieve their shared goal. In addition, the story honors the value of learning from the wisdom of elders. Ethan's experience provides a foundation of knowledge that guides Clara through dangerous encounters and moral dilemmas. Yet, her fresh perspective reminds him that even the most seasoned adventurers have much to learn from the younger generation. Together, they balance the lessons of age and the vitality of youth, reinforcing the idea that growth comes from the collective experiences of generations. Lastly, the tale stands as a comforting reminder that doing what's right isn't always easy. It's about standing up against wrongdoing, even when it means going against overwhelming odds. The courage to stand alone, to challenge injustice, and to protect the innocent is what creates heroes in the truest sense. In essence, this story isn't just an adventure. It's a heartfelt journey through life's greatest values. It inspires, uplifts, and reassures listeners of all ages that within their own hearts lies the power to overcome adversity, uphold what is just, and leave a lasting impact on the world around them.